What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some highlights from yesterday's Xbox Partner Preview for 2026. Now, as you would expect, this had some announcements, some, I would say, lighter updates, but overall was a tad bit more interesting than I was actually expecting it to be. And yet, do keep in mind this is a highlights and I'm mostly focusing on stuff that is relevant to this channel, sharing my thoughts on that stuff. And so there are a handful of things that were in the show that I am not covering here because they're not terribly relevant to the channel. Otherwise though, let's go ahead and just dive fully into this and go over all of these. We're going to kick it off with the easiest one, the Expanse Osiris Reborn. This got a few different updates. I actually covered them all separately in a video yesterday as I had a little bit of knowledge ahead of time about this one's updates and everything. So if you want a little more detail on this one, do feel free to go watch that video, but otherwise, the important stuff to note is that it is going to be shooting for a spring 2027 release. They are also doing a closed beta starting on April 22nd, so not too much longer for that, and it will also be a Day 1 Game Pass title. Excited to see what Owlcat does with the big genre shift for them. Now, I next up want to talk about the reveal that actually stole the show a bit for me, and that was Hunter the Reckoning at Deathwish. This is a World of Darkness IP, the people who make Vampire the Masquerade, stuff like that. This time with it being centered around Hunter the Reckoning. Of course, the vampire hunters that track down, things like vampires, werewolves, etc., utilizing their holy power of righteous fury, and a couple of other things. Straight away, this game is apparently releasing in summer of 2027. It is being made by Teon, more on that in just a second, but while this was just a game announcement in general, I've got to say it was crazy that this particular announcement or reveal had, I would say, way more World of Darkness vibes than Bloodlines 2 did, which actually does leave me a little more positive for what this game could be. Because I think coming at it from the angle of Hunter the Reckoning does kind of free them up from some of the baggage that I think the Vampire the Masquerade IP has kind of backed itself into a corner with lately. And that'll let them, of course, turn the tables a bit. But I wanted to mention Teon in particular, the developer. You would probably know them best from the recent RoboCop Rogue City, which was, surprisingly, pretty good. Now, I wanted to mention that because Teon seems to be a private company for the most part. However, this game is being published by Nacon. Nacon, as a publisher, has run into some finance issues recently, and I would be surprised if Nacon is the publisher that brings this one to the finish line, even just a year later in summer of 2027. So something to keep an eye on there, but I do sincerely hope that this project sees the light of day. It looks very cool. Next up, there was Grave Season. I'll be very upfront with you guys. Grave Season is not my normal type of game, but it's the twist it is going for that makes it more interesting to me personally. So Grave Season is one of those games kind of like, the Stardew Valley types of situations. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because it has a small twist, and that is that somebody in the town is a serial killer, which immediately makes that much more interesting to me personally at the very least, but obviously we'll see what actually happens with it. But it is supposed to be releasing later this year on August 14th. Following that, we got the announcement of a new Serious Sam title, which is going to be like a roguelike co-op game coming sometime in 2026. Not my usual jam, just kind of wanted to mention it because it was a Serious Sam title, which I thought was interesting. Then we also got a trailer for Stranger Than Heaven. This is a game that had been announced previously, and the main crux of the announcement here on the partner preview was just that they were going to be doing a deep dive of this title on May 6th, where we'll learn a full bit more about it, I would imagine, as details are a bit sparse. Other than that, is coming soon and is related to the Yakuza series. I'll probably cover that in its deep dive in May sometime. Keeping it moving, however, a couple of quick announcements. Hades 2 is coming to the Xbox on April 14th. Dispatch is coming to Xbox sometime during the summer. Dispatch being the narrative superhero title from later last year that really blew up, and then Hades 2, of course, being popular as always, but next up, we've got Alien Deathstorm. Alien Deathstorm is very interesting to me personally because of who it is from, which is Rebellion, the people who made Atomfall recently and then the Sniper Elite series. Alien Deathstorm, however, this time is going to be a sci-fi horror experience, supposed to be releasing sometime in 2027, and more than anything, this has me pumped after seeing what they did with Atomfall. They described Atomfall as being a bit of an experiment for them in terms of how they approach some things, and I hope they consider it a successful one because I thought Atomfall was a great game, even though it didn't quite get around to its DLCs. And so, watching them continue to do different stuff with this Alien Deathstorm title is of great interest to me, and I hope they manage to bring it across the finish line in a really satisfying way. Then we got the announcement, finally, of some Stalker 2 DLC coming in summer of this year. I believe it's called Call to Hope. DLC is going to focus on the fighting between the two factions, Duty and Freedom, and of course they showed off some of that via the trailer and everything. However, what is more interesting to me here personally is it's going to be a good opportunity to take another look at Stalker 2 after they released a whole ton of updates aimed at fixing it and getting up to date with people's expectations, and while I haven't really had time to look at that stuff, this DLC will provide a convenient excuse to get back in there and, of course, check out everything it's got going on. Then there was Vaunted. Vaunted is looking to be a sort of action tactical type game where we play as 3 criminals trying to set up a big heist, and it is supposed to be coming sometime later in 2026. This game kind of seemed a little more lighthearted and fun, maybe something I could play with my son. We'll obviously have to see about that, but honestly there's a lot of big heavy titles coming in the next year or so, and I'm always kind of looking for some more lighthearted stuff to fill the gaps and provide a slightly different experience, and I think Vaunted might be able to provide that just from the stuff I have seen thus far. But speaking of slightly heavier titles, we then have Moosa. In particular, this is an action game taking place in 17th century Korea, during which Korea experienced a pretty big famine, and you'll be exploring that period, fighting a bunch of monsters as you go, of course, as one would probably expect with these types of action games. Now, I will say, there have been a lot of these types of games lately, and I don't know if it's fair to this game per se, but I am sensing a little bit of fatigue in general from some people, at least with these, but if it's good, I don't think anybody will care too much. In either event, we'll be able to find out for ourselves come 2027 when it is shooting for its release. Now, that is pretty much going to do it for the highlights of this particular event. Like I said, not a bad one overall. But for me, The Expanse and Hunter the Reckoning are the ones I am the most interested in. I may well make a separate video talking about Hunter the Reckoning just kind of on its own, so I can give people a general idea of what like the TTRPG is all about, and so some stuff we might see in game, as I do genuinely hope that one gets released and everything. Otherwise, however, I would love to know what you guys thought of the show, if there are any of these games you particularly enjoyed seeing shown off, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.